I put the compact binocs to my face and looked down at the sea of protesters that had massed around the steep walls of the Cryonox compound. Many dressed in clothes a step away from rags, faded, torn, and mismatched. Some were bare-chested, their bones jutting from pale, sickly frames. They carried the classic signs, all seemingly written by the same 5-year-old. Cryo coward, frozen fascist, eat the rich. The roar of the mob as they chanted these slogans rivaled the whirring drill of the helicopter blades. I sighed. If only those damned Rise Up hackers hadn't leaked the location of this place. We landed on the topmost helipad and I stepped off as a tall old man approached. With his glowing orange eye, pale bald head, and unusually large ears, he looked like a cyborg Nosferatu. Greetings, Mr. Hunt. It is a pleasure to finally make your acquaintance, he said. And yours, Dr. Thusler. I only wish it were under different circumstances. A small smile crept at the corner of his leathery lips. Why? I thought business was booming for your company. I scowled, but kept my voice restrained. Yes, a little too, well, some might say. Don't fret. What's done is done. Time to move on. Or move forward, I should say. Isn't that why you're here? I nodded. Good, he said, and slapped me on the back. Let's get going. We rode the elevator down for 5 minutes until the doors dinged open at floor -150. We crossed the porcelain white hallway and stood in front of a door that looked like the big brother of a bank vault's own. The doctor slotted a prism that protruded from the face of the door into his silver cybernetic arm. A purple beam shot out from overhead and into his orange eye. 10 seconds later, the door hissed open. Inside was a vast white room filled with row upon row of grey rectangles that resembled coffins. Various devices nestled around each like funeral attendees. Glass walls partitioned them so that each rectangle had its own cubicle. The doctor led me down the rows until he reached a glass cubicle near the center. He pressed his palm to it, and the wall parted down an invisible seam. He stepped inside and produced a one-piece carbon weave suit from a sealed bag that lay on top of the cryogenic chamber. Please change into this. Your clothes will be placed in storage alongside the belongings you shipped over. I changed as the doctor pressed a button at the chamber's side and the door unhinged to reveal a pool of blue gel. One by one, the lights from the machine surrounding it switched from blinking yellow to solid green. A plethora of readouts materialized on the machine with a screen. Everything is ready, he said, turning back to me. But before you step inside, let me go over a few things. My androids will wake you once the pre-selected time has elapsed. Then they will escort you to the living space after you reclaim your possessions. In the event a nuclear holocaust has not occurred or radiation levels are low enough, you may leave the premises. Lastly, do not try to wake any of the other sleepers. Any questions? No, I read the pamphlet. He smiled, revealing brilliant white veneers, and clapped his hands. Great. Please step inside the chamber and lay back. Don't worry about suffocating. The chamber circulates air until you no longer need it. I swallowed, then did as he said. I floated on top of the gel, though it felt more like a giant cushion of air than anything real. See you in a couple of lifetimes, the doctor said with a wave and closed the lid. In the blackness, a synthetic voice called out, "Occupant detected. Commencing neural dampening, oxygen desaturation, preservative injection, and cryogenic cooldown in T-minus 60 seconds." Around me, the gel rose, and my mind flashed back to childhood tales of quick mud. However, this was much worse. Sensation evaporated from every inch of skin it touched. It swallowed me up to my neck, and I tried to stand, tried to push the lid open. Nothing happened. A lance of horror pierced my brain as I realized I couldn't feel my limbs, nor my chest or back. I was a head and nothing else. 5 seconds later, the gel consumed that too, and my mind dissolved in an ocean of darkness. There was bright light, a slurp of draining liquid, a flooding of warmth, movement. Consciousness trickled back in, followed by identity. The disorientation felt after a death-like doze faded. I opened my eyes. A woman of exquisite beauty stood over me. Flawless fair skin, haloed by hair darker than tar, light hazel eyes, and her lips, like rubies marinated in blood. "You're awake," she said, and smiled. Her voice was light and pleasant, yet had an artificial twang. Then I noticed the black polycarbonate that covered her lower jaw, as well as the thin black seam that cut across the top half of her face. "You're an android," I said. She smiled and bowed her head. I sat up and felt my head spin. She must have realized, because she offered her hand and pulled me out of the chamber. Then she held me up when my legs buckled under long forgotten weight. "Don't feel embarrassed. This happens to everyone. The chamber can only mitigate muscle atrophy. For now, you are as unfamiliar with walking as when you were 1. I sighed and put my arm around her shoulders and hobbled out of the glass cubicle. All the cryogenic chambers closest to the door were already open. "Are there people already awake?" I asked. "Yes, in the living area. We're having a celebratory dinner tonight." "We?" She blinked, then giggled. "Sorry, I meant they. Androids can't eat, of course. I am just the chef." "Ah," I said, finally understanding why she was wearing a double-breasted white jacket and matching trousers. Then a thought that had been festering in my subconscious broke through. "How long has it been? How long did you choose to run for?" I frowned. "Excuse me?" "Run forward, as in forward in time, until the Earth recovered." Her eyes flashed. "Oh." "Oh? What do you mean by oh?" "I'll show you." The sunset was magnificent. A medley of pastel blues and reds, streaked by purple where the sun met the sky. The fading scarlet light illuminated snow-capped mountains with dense vegetation at their base. "So we can leave?" I asked, turning back to her. "Look at the readings." I glanced at the green dials at the edge of the screen. 120 millisieverts. So what? Not ideal, but not exactly deadly. "Those are sieverts." "Maybe you should stick to cooking," I chuckled. "There's vegetation right there on those mountain slopes." She didn't say anything. Instead, she hovered her hand over the screen and pinched out. The live video zoomed right in on the base of the mountain. What I thought had been a dense grouping of trees was a titanic mass of dark green sludge. It bubbled and frothed until a long, skinny tree emerged from its depths. I frowned, then clamped a hand over my mouth to muffle a yell. Eyes the size of dinner plates festooned the branches where leaves should be. They blinked in unison, and the tree twisted about, surveying the area. Then the eye stalk sank back into the sludge. What the hell is that? The fruits of your labor. What? Don't pretend. I turned to her. I don't know what you're talking about. She gave me a look that could cleave stone in two. Our ancestors told us what you did. The Zeta Cobalt bombs you designed, then sold to the highest bidder. Ancestors? The people of your time. Those who had to stay up there while their persecutors hid down here. I tried to back away, but she leapt forward and pinned me against the screen with one arm. Her eyes blazed with an intensity that no machine could replicate. You're not an android. No. What you see are the spoils of war, she said, gesturing to her face and body, both armor and trophy, peeled and plucked from the corpses of the Mad Doctor's slaves, from those who slaughtered us by the thousands while we sought sanctuary. You can't be. Oh, but we are. How? Rise up. They found us a way in, gave us an opportunity for survival and retribution. We didn't squander it then, and we won't squander it now. A needle coated in blue liquid sprang from her left wrist, and she stabbed me with it. I tried to slap her hand away, but it was too late. My arm wouldn't obey. A second later, I collapsed as if boneless, and darkness engulfed my mind. I woke to a view of a tall stone ceiling from which a chandelier dangled down. I tried to sit up but couldn't. No sensation came from below my neck. I peered down and found that I was stark naked and lying on a tray, itself on an enormous dining table. 20 people sat around me on high-backed chairs, dressed in suits and gowns. Their faces were smooth and unblemished, just like the woman. Thin dark seams were visible on those closest to me. 2 other tables sat on either side of mine, each clustered by more people, all of them watching me. A giant man stood at the head of my table, wearing a suit that strained to contain his ridiculous bulk. He held a goblet of wine high in the air with a silver prosthetic arm, while his single glowing orange eye bore into me. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here once again to commemorate the achievements of our ancestors, to honor them. Thanks to their sacrifice, we sit sheltered from the toxic light that has consumed the earth. They fought for 300 years, floor to floor, room to room, even as their bones decayed and organs failed. Resources grew scarce, and the toughest of choices had to be made. Some became essential, even after it all ended. But today, we found another worm of the apocalypse, lifting the burden of grim necessity. Today, we celebrate. A chorus of cheers erupted across the room. Yet, we need not fear machine remnants in this chamber. We need not conceal ourselves. Let us see our brothers and sisters without these masks. He put a hand to his face and splayed his fingers out. The face split in two along the seam and retracted. I shrieked, and the cry echoed several times in the chamber. The man's face was a monstrous collage of eyes, ears, and teeth that had no rhyme or reason when it came to position. The others followed suit, revealing their own abominable lumpy faces which glistened with pus or mucus. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was all a dream, but strong fingers pried them open. "Don't close your eyes, Mr. Hunt," the mutant leader said, his voice now guttural. "You need to see what you've done. You thought you could hide down here and leave your sins behind, while I deliver a message from our forefathers. You thought wrong. All you can do now is repay us with the only thing you have left." There was a clack of shoes on stone, and a woman stepped into view carrying a huge meat cleaver. It was her, the chef. However, her mask was off, displaying a face of 2 conjoined mouths and 3 pus-filled eyes. "What are you doing?" I screamed. The chef gave no reply and instead stuffed a rag into my mouth. I continued to scream behind the gag as she raised the cleaver high, then slammed it down like a lumberjack. The clash of metal on metal rang throughout the room. Had she missed? Was it some sort of sick, practical joke? Relief took a few tentative steps into my mind, then was crushed by an avalanche of horror as she lifted my lower leg off the tray and carried it to the giant mutant. She presented it to his mouth, and he bit down on the calf with his oversized, deformed teeth. Blood spurted out and dribbled down his chin. He chewed, swallowed, then let out a groan of pleasure. "Thank you, daughter," he said, and planted a kiss on one of her lips. "Now serve the rest of our people." She put the leg on his plate and started to walk back to me. I thrashed my head from side to side, begging my body to move. It was no use. Then the leader spoke again. "Oh, and don't forget to save the brains for the children. They'll need it to grow big and strong, just like their father."